Hello everybody, it's Sarah, and today it is time to talk about the books that I read in April. By the way, ignore the mess that is my chin, please. I face planted the floor, so yeah. I'd rather not talk about it because it was pretty embarrassing, not gonna lie. Anyway, today it's time to talk about the books that I read in April. In April, I also finally took part again in a readathon, which was the Tomes and Treasures readathon, which is a D&D readathon. This first round was about building our characters. I didn't fully build my character, but that's okay because we have time until the next round to finish our build. But I won't go through which prompts I finished and stuff in this video. I'll just do a regular wrap-up. And since this is a regular wrap-up, let's start with stats. I read a total, or finished a total of 8 books in April, of which one was a reread, right? Yeah, one was a reread. The moods, according to Storygraph, because I always go through my Storygraph stats, were adventurous, dark, mysterious, tense, and funny. In terms of pace, a bit more than 40% of the books that I read were judged as medium paced, 30% fast, and 30% slow paced. Page numbers, 25% of the books that I read were over 500 pages, 25% under 300 pages, and then the other 50% were between 300 and 500 pages. I only read fiction books this month. Genres were fantasy, LGBTQIA, young adult, romance, historical, and contemporary. Formats, 75%, so 6 books were print and then 2 were digital. Languages, I mostly read books in English, 6 books in English. However, this month I did also read 2 books in German. In terms of star ratings, my average rating this month was 3.81 stars. I had 1 2-star, 1 3.5 star, no, sorry, 2 3.5 stars, 1 3.75 star, 3 4.25 stars, and then 1 5-star, which actually was my reread because I amended my rating for that book. Then in terms of my inclusion stats, let me just very quickly think about this. So I actually don't know which my digital books were right now, so let me look at those for a second. I had, okay, 1, 2, 3, possibly 4 books written by BIPOC authors. I'll get to why I'm like possibly 4, I'm not quite sure. But then out of the other 4 books that are left over, 2 books had main side characters that were BIPOC as well. In terms of queerness, I had 1, 2, 3, 4 books with queer main characters or by queer authors. And in terms of disability rep, I had, I'm not sure actually. I don't think I had any books right now with disability or mental health rep, but I might be missing something. So yeah, that's it for my stats, and now let's get into the wrap up. First, as always, I want to start with my reread, and the reread was The Kings, or not The Kings, Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Ames, which is the first book in the Band series. I reread this, among other things, because I am DMing a D&D one-shot, and I thought that this world, because it is very inspired by D&D, might lend itself very nicely to a one-shot, so I wanted to reread it. And I've been meaning to reread this for a while anyway, because when I first read this, I hadn't yet started even getting into D&D, and definitely not started playing D&D, and so I wanted to reread this with like a new mindset. For those of you who don't know, The Band is a series of connected companion novels. I would suggest reading them in order. So far we have 2 of them, because in the second one we follow children of the main characters in the first one. However, I don't think you absolutely have to read them in order. And each book is, first of all, inspired by a different decade within music history, and then also at the same time, this is very D&D inspired fantasy story, or like TTRPG trope heavy fantasy story. In this first one, we follow Clay Cooper, who lives with his wife and his daughter. He used to be a member of this mercenary band. Within this world, in general, mercenary bands are kind of treated like rock stars. However, over the past few years, like, the focus of these mercenary bands has shifted from actually doing good and fighting monsters to still fighting monsters, however, mostly in arenas, and the monsters are bred for that purpose to be fought in arenas. However, now there's a big massive monster horde that's besieging this city and this republic, and so news reaches Clay via the old leader of the band that he was a part of, which is called Saga. And the reason why this old leader looks for him is because he wants to get the band back together, because his daughter is caught in the city, and so he wants to get the band back together to rescue her. And so these, you know, by the standards of their time, old men come together and go on a journey to rescue the daughter of their leader. And it's like, in parts of it, it is very humorous. However, it is incredibly emotional as well. I absolutely love it. And I had, like, when I read this the first time, it was in the year, I think, where I didn't give it a rating. At least I didn't give it a rating on Goodreads or Storygraph, but I had to amend my rating and give this 5 stars, because this, like, if this isn't your cup of tea, I understand it, because it has a very specific mood in which it is written. It is also very trope heavy, and so, you know, it won't be everyone's cup of tea. However, it perfectly manages to do what it sets out to do. And there's just so many instances where you can see the TTRPG influences in how the characters act, what exactly happens, how things are described, rather than just, you know, general fantasy influences. And I absolutely loved and adored it. I also love the characters. It hit just as emotionally as the first time. Once again, I teared up at multiple points. It's an amazing story, and I can highly, highly recommend it to a lot of people. So usually I try not to ramble this long when it comes to rereads, but I had to with this one. And now let's get into the first time reads. I just have to go back to Storygraph to see what I had for each book. So the first one I have is my 2-star read, and that was Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. And I am so sad that I gave this 2 stars, because, to be honest, the concept of this sounds very interesting. It's written by a trans author, which also kind of makes me hurt that I gave it 2 stars, because I don't generally like giving already marginalized authors low ratings, because, you know, they have it hard enough as it is. However, with this one, I just did not enjoy it whatsoever. So the concept of this is basically, what if you took J.K. Rowling and made her the villain of your story? This is set within, like, modern day England, Great Britain. I think maybe the main village this is set in might even be in Scotland. I don't know, to be honest. And within this alternate reality, I'm gonna say, you have witches and you have warlocks. And a few years ago there was like a war between witches and warlocks, or not between witches and warlocks. There was a war because there was basically this world's version of Grindelwald coming, and who said, you know, we are better than humans and we shouldn't live in secret. And there were others who were like, no, there's reasons for that. And so that was a few years back. Now there's prophecies of, like, I forgot what it's called, like this child that's gonna bring about the end of the world by raising the Leviathan or something or other. And so when one day a child turns up, or a teen turns up, who is incredibly powerful, who shouldn't be this powerful because the child is thought to be a warlock, and warlocks aren't more powerful than witches. However, this child seems to be more powerful than any witch alive. There's people being like, well, that's weird. And our main character, however, or one of our main characters, is like, hey, let's not jump to conclusions. Takes this child in, turns out the child is trans, and however the like high priestess, whatever, leader of the huge coven of Her Majesty's Royal Coven is like, no, that can't be. This child is a warlock, this child can't be a witch, and basically is a TERF. And so it sounds really interesting because you have this concept of, you know, who has what power, etc, etc, and, you know, about trust and about bigotry and whatever. However, the way this was written was just so badly written, in my opinion. This read like a 2013 BuzzFeed feminism progressive article, which I don't particularly enjoy that type of writing, not gonna lie. I in fact pretty much hate it. I also in between felt really uncomfortable because there was this character who was a black witch, and it felt like this character only existed just simply to be there to, you know, throw out standard lines about intersectionality. And the things that she said were very important because, you know, there is such a thing as intersectionality, etc, etc. However, the way it was included in the story and the way that this witch was utilized simply to say those things felt really wrong, especially when there were then also lines about Asian witches and how those witches are mad at her for focusing on black witches and not including them. And there was a lot going on that I really didn't like. I didn't like the writing style, I didn't like the character building. I also thought that there were way too many POV characters. We had 4 POV characters, and really 2 of those POV characters you could have thrown out and the story wouldn't have changed at all. They didn't add anything via their POV. The only thing was that they took away from the time that we had with the other 2 characters, where we could have fleshed out their motivations. One of those 2 POV characters was the villain of the story, the other one was the hero, I guess, of the story. So yeah, it just, I thought it was badly written, not badly written, but like it wasn't written in a way where I could enjoy it. I thought there were some poor writing choices made, and I thought that there was like, it didn't have the nuance that I prefer in my books, pretty much. So yeah, made me really sad. I'm probably gonna get rid of the book, but what can you do? Next are my 3.5 star books. First, I have my buddy read for my book club, which is Of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, which is all about reading adult fantasy written by women and genderqueer folks. And in April, we read Fathom Folk by Eliza Chen. In May, for those of you who are interested, we're gonna be reading One Dark Window by Rachel Gillis. So, Fathom Folk is the first book in a series. I have the Illumicrate edition, which is just so gorgeous, not gonna lie. And this is set in a city called, I think, Tiankali or something, where you have humans and Fathom Folk living side by side. Ages ago, or like years ago, there was a war between humans and Fathom Folk. Part of that is because the Fathom Folk havens are slowly getting lost because of pollution, etc. And so Fathom Folk have almost nowhere to go. And in the city, supposedly humans and Fathom Folk live side by side. However, the reality is that Fathom Folk are oppressed. And part of the way they are oppressed is they have to wear manacles that suppress their powers under the guise of protecting humans. We follow 3 different main characters. One is a sea witch whose motivations are kind of dubious. One is Mira, who is the first Fathom Folk who has become a captain of the border guard. So she is partially in charge of looking after the people coming into the city and looking after it that everything's like going fine. And then the last one is N something, I forgot her name, who is the younger sister of the Fathom Folk, what's it called? Minister, I guess, kind of, who is also Mira's boyfriend, who is sent to the city into exile by her mother after she tried stealing a dragon's pearl. And so everything kind of starts happening in the city as these three characters come together and as stuff starts getting worse for Fathom Folk because things happen. So overall, I have to say I did enjoy the story. There were especially two characters, Mira and Kai, who is the minister for the Fathom Folk and Mira's boyfriend, who I did really enjoy following and reading about. I enjoyed the Sea Witch as a character, however I thought she was partially kind of poorly written simply because it's like never really clear what her motivations are exactly in the story. The thing that bothered me the most is that the way it was written was kind of disjointed. There were very short chapters and I did have, once again, some issues with the nuance, etc. However, overall, I still gave it 3.5 stars. I definitely want to continue on with the series and I will film a full review of this at some point, hopefully within the next week. The next one I have was the book that I picked for my read around the world in April. The country I pulled for that was Azerbaijan, and first of all, I had a really hard time finding a book for Azerbaijan because like I did find a handful of books, like 2 or 3. However, generally speaking, I still want the book to somewhat sound interesting to me, which I'm a lot more lenient with these types of books than otherwise. And there was only one book that I was like, okay, I can see myself reading this, so that's what I picked. However, the problem is that this book was published in 1937 in Vienna. And the author who published this published it under a pseudonym, and so there's 3 different possible authors who might be the authors for this. One is like, or 2 of them are like Jewish people in Vienna, and one of them is an Azerbaijani author. However, I found this on literally every list that was like, okay, this is like important Azerbaijani literature. So I ended up reading it also because it is set in Baku, which is the capital of Azerbaijan. And this book is set between like 1910 and 1920, and it follows like I'm sorry, I should show you the book. The book is Ali and Nino by Kuban Said, and it follows Ali and Nino. Ali is a Muslim boy growing up in Baku, and Nino is a Georgian Christian girl, and the 2 of them fall in love, and basically this is their love story. However, it is not the type of love story where it's like Romeo and Juliet, and you know, the families don't want them to be together because they're of different faiths. There's really not that many issues with them getting together and getting married. However, what this book focuses around a lot is their differences, how their love sometimes overcomes their differences and how it also doesn't overcome their differences. And it also focuses around Baku as this city that's kind of between the Western world and Asia and like the Muslim world. And it's so interesting because like, especially because it's written from Ali's POV, and I'm not exactly sure if this was written in an Orientalist way or not, because sometimes it feels like the author really doesn't like Muslims because they're sometimes portrayed as like kind of brutal, I guess. However, maybe that's just my more modern worldview, because there's other instances where the author just shows so much love to the traditions and the practices of someone growing up Muslim, and it's not really written in a way where, you know, those practices are necessarily deemed like completely unnecessary or whatever. And so I just found this a very, very interesting book. I'm very happy I read it, and yeah, let's see what the future Read Around the World books bring. And I guess on that topic, maybe we should pull my book for June. So I did make my cauldron slightly fuller, however I still only got up to the letter J, so yeah, which I know will be the ones at the top. So you know what, let me just pick a random one over here. There we have one. Let's pick this book. For May, by the way, I have decided to read books from both countries. And for June, I have Djibouti. So yeah, let's see if I find anything for that, I guess. Next we have my 3.75 star book, which was The Monstrous Mrs Ma by Van Huang. This I had an arc for, and I read it, and I was pleasantly surprised by it. I didn't really like, I kind of requested this spur of the moment. I think because I saw that you didn't really have to request it, you just had to download it on NetGalley, so I just did that. And this is historical urban fantasy set in Los Angeles, I think in Los Angeles, maybe San Francisco, one or the other, in I believe the 60s or 70s. And it follows Cordy Mai, who is on the lookout for a flat because she was thrown out by her parents. She was born to immigrant Vietnamese or Vietnamese immigrant parents. Actually, yeah, I think 60s or 70s should be right, because they fled during the Vietnam War. Or it's set during the Vietnam War. One or the other. I once again forgot. Anyway, and so she's looking for a flat, and the flat that she finds just so happens to have a bunch of other Asian girls in there, and all of them, their second name is Mai. And all of them are kind of down on their luck. However, there's like this man who's a friend of their landlord who promises to help them with witchcraft. And so they say yes, and things start to go up until they don't. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the characters. I especially enjoyed Cordy and her relationships, her character growth. And yeah, it's just a neat little story. It's one of those books where it's like sometimes it's really worth it randomly picking up a book that you don't know anything about, that you don't know if you'll like it or not, because you have zero expectations. And so things can only look up. And that was the case with this one for me. Then for my 4.25 stars books, first I have The Brides at High Hill by Nivo, which is the 5th book in the Singing Hills novella series. I saw after I added this that we will have 3 more, so I'm really excited for that one. The Singing Hills series follows Chi, who is a traveling cleric monk type character and also a story collector. And so each book follows them as they travel their little world and as they meet different people, and then each book kind of is those people that telling them a story. And yeah, I really enjoy the books. There's not really that much more to say. Those are novellas. I can highly recommend them, and I enjoyed this one, so yeah. Although I think it might be one of my lesser favorites in the series. Like, I think it might be my least or my second to least favorite, possibly. Then I have finally read Die Farbe der Lache, Die Farbe der Rache by Cornelia Funke, which is the 4th book, the most recent addition to the Inkworld series, which started with Inkheart, obviously. It doesn't really make that much sense to sum up the Inkheart series, because this last book has little to do anymore with the first book, because like so much has happened in between. We still follow characters from the first books. We follow Dustfinger, who is of course a fan favorite, and then we also follow the Black Prince. And stuff happens in this story where the two of them have to go on a journey to basically save everyone else from the other books. and also have to fight once again against an old, not memory, enemy. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I loved it. I loved getting to know the Black Prince as a character, because we only really get to know him as the Black Prince. In the other books, he is given a name in this one, and also getting to learn some more about Dustfinger's past. It's just, it felt homely and lovely, and I really enjoyed it. And then the last book I have is Nama's Curse by Jacqueline Carey. This is the second book in Moirin's trilogy, in the Nama trilogy, which is the third trilogy within the Kushiel's Legacy universe. And this series is kind of like the Realms of the Elderlings, so you basically follow different characters in all the books, but they're all connected, so it's kind of hard to, once again, like sum up very quickly and concisely what these series are about. In the first one we follow Phaedra, who is a courtesan spy, and the second one we follow Imri, who is the son of a traitor, and in the third one this is set like 3 or 4 generations after the first 2 series, and we follow Moirin, who is the daughter of one of the Maguin Don, who were kind of villains in one of the other series, and then also the daughter of a priest of Nama, so a man of Théodange, and she kind of has to go on a journey to find her destiny. I really enjoy these books. I will talk more about them once I finish book 3. I will do a full series review once again. Something that I really appreciate, I mean, not gonna lie, the covers are kind of bad of this series, but something like, not bad as in, you know, gaudy, which they are as well, but bad as in, you know, cultural appropriative, I guess. But something that happens a lot in this series, well, the first 2 series mostly were centered in Théodange, which is this version's France / this version's Europe. The Nama trilogy, like, Moirin travels a lot, and in these first 2 books she traveled a lot to Asia, and I actually really appreciate how she interacts with the different cultures there. She's usually very respectful, and yeah, it's just very interesting how Jacqueline Carey manages to write 3 such very different main characters that all go through their own journey, and that on the surface they like kind of have the same path. Like, concept-wise, the books are very similar. You always have a main character going on a journey. However, in execution, all of the books are incredibly different, and so yeah, I love them. And now the only thing left to do is, since that was the last book I wanted to talk about, to pull from my series TBR jar. I pulled The Dark Gods by Tara Sim. I'm pointing over there because the book is over there, for what's it called? For April. However, I only started the second book in that series today. Nevertheless, we will pick a new one from my series TBR jar. So I have my TBR jar here, and let's just open this and see which series I will continue on with. And I have The Scions of the White Lotus by J.C. Kang. These are like almost novellas. They're very short books. I read the first one in 2021, I think, and it's somewhere over there, and it's about these group of women who like outwardly are courtesans also, but secretly are like spies and assassins. So yeah, I'll continue on with that series. And with that being said, that was it for my wrap up. Tell me in the comments down below if you have read any of the books that I talked about and what your thoughts were on them. If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up, and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media as well as to my book club will be linked in the description box down below, so go and check those out, and I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!